In 1907, Regina was a community of less than 10,000 in a province only 2 years old. But as a booming hub of Canada's agricultural heartland, it was growing fast, and despite being surrounded by a bleak and treeless plain, it boasted a shallow lake formed by the damming of a small creek. A body of water, no matter how small, suggested a boat, wrote sports writer Don McMillan, a sentiment carried by Regina citizens such as Ernest McCallum, Walter Hill, and Frederick Haltane, just a few of the prominent founding members of the Regina Boat Club. The first RBC meeting took place on Saturday, June 15, 1907, and Charles E.D. Wood was elected as the first president, and the first secretary was Martin Wilkinson Sr., whose daughter-in-law is with us tonight. However, it took 3 years until the spoon of an oar was first dipped into Wascana Lake. In the intervening period, the lake was drained, the dam rebuilt, and the Broad Street Bridge constructed. Construction had also begun on the Legislative Building in 1908, a process that would take 4 years. So when the RBC's first facility officially opened on July 1, 1910, the 120 boat club members could boast that before there was a ledge on the southern shores of the mighty Wascana, there was a boathouse on the north. It was clear from the start, while the RBC was an umbrella club for many aquatic sports, rowing was high on the agenda. There is no reason, Wood commented in 1909, why we cannot turn out a crew that would carry off the Dominion Championship. By 1912, the club's 2-year-old boathouse was full of new boats and featured renovated rec rooms, showers, electricity, and a phone. Members competed in Saturday rowing, swimming, canoeing, sailing, and motorboat races, and held regular dances and fundraisers. On June 30th, members awoke to a calm, sunny day to begin final preparations for the next day's annual Dominion Day Regatta. Wascana Lake was as smooth as a politician's tongue, Macmillan wrote of the day, but at 4:50 p.m. the infamous Regina cyclone struck, killing 28 and destroying the RBC boathouse. The boats, the dock, the facility, it was all gone. But by September, the members' enduring spirit put to the test, it had been rebuilt, and the next summer, Ray Cohen, the RBC's rowing captain who coached with an iron fist that was backed by a heart of gold, took a crew to the club's first out-of-town regatta in Winnipeg.
Who is that outfit?
A Winnipeg rowing club member asked when he saw the RBC crew practicing on the Red River. Regina, his companion said.
Regina? Where in the hell do they row?
After finishing a close second to a Henley-winning WRC crew, Winnipeg had figured it out. World War I put a halt to RBC activities. Of the club's 171 male members, 101 served their country, the highest percentage of any boat club in North America. Vimy Ridge, Ypres, the Somme, they all looked the same to Regina boat clubbers, wrote Macmillan. Just another race to be won. After the war, the club was determined to live up to Charles Wood's ambition of turning out crews to go after the best there was in Canada and develop the Regina style. Rowing with a short layback and high stroke rate, the club won its first NWIRA title in 1920 in the Workboat 4, capturing the Machen Cup, which was proudly paraded through the streets of Regina. It is an anomaly, wrote the local paper, that a prairie city should have possessed the team with such excellent skill, but it goes to show that, with proper management, almost every form of sport can be made available to prairie dwellers. Despite the promising start, the 1920s did not see the RBC rise to national glory, but the club was nonetheless at the heart of Regina's athletic and social life, with regular dances attracting hundreds and reported on in the local paper. While women were permitted only as associate members, in the summer of 1927, Amby Malone and Harry Murray coached two women's crews who raced off at the end of the summer. Murray's grandsons, it should be noted, are Ian and Gavin Mitchell, who themselves have competed and coached for the Regina Rowing Club. Drought dried up Wascana Lake in the early 30s, but 1933 marked the beginning of the RBC's most successful rowing years. With a flotilla of shells and interest in rowing at an all-time high, as many as a dozen fours competed for the Armstrong Cup, the trophy given to the club's fastest crew. With the Regina style perfected, the RBC won 7 races at the NWIRA from 1934 to 1937, despite training on a lake full of weeds. The weeds were so bad in the summer of 1935 that club members welded razor blades to a 25-foot contraption designed to act as a swath that they pulled across the lake. The success at the NWIRA stirred talk of sending a crew to the 1936 Olympic trials, but unfortunately, getting to the trials was simply too expensive. It was, after all, the Depression. But in 1938, the RBC Light Men's Four of bowmen Harry Duckett, Newt Hughes, Dick Priest, and stroke Jack Peart represented Regina at the Canadian Henley for the first time. To cut costs, recalled Hughes, we slept in cheap hotels and didn't eat much. God, we were hungry. But their hunger for medals was greater, and, racing in what their competition called a prairie tub, the RBC won both their junior and senior events. Their results were called the most outstanding achievement in Regina's history, and Wascana Lake was described as a proving ground for some of Canada's best oarsmen. In September of 1971, the crew became the first rowers to be inducted into the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame. A tornado, drought, weeds, war, the Great Depression, the RBC had overcome them all in producing a Canadian championship crew. The club set its sights on the 1940 Olympics, but in 1939, war was declared, and instead of taking their oars to the Olympics to row for their club, RBC members took guns to war to fight for their country. During the war, a small group of members kept the club alive, and when peacetime returned, it didn't take long for the RBC to rebuild its membership. Rowing remained hugely popular, with upwards of 60 men competing for the Armstrong Cup. The club also constructed a new boathouse on Willow Island, and in 1949 accomplished another first. "Boat Club hits big time," the Leader Post headline read. Regina, where legend says there isn't any water, has just been awarded the NWIRA Championships. Held at Regina Beach, the regatta drew over 3,000 spectators on the final day of races. The club remained competitive through the 1950s, but in 1959 there was only 12 muddy, weedy inches of water left in Wascana Lake, and a few years later, the club's membership, which had once been as high as 400, was down to 50. With nowhere to row, the RBC disbanded. The boathouse was torn down, the boats left to rot in a field near Katepwa Lake. "A club that has survived so much deserves a better fate than oblivion," stated the Leader Post. But 1964 marked the finish for the Regina Boat Club. It's only fitting that the man who contributed to the Regina Boat Club's finest moment was the one to bring rowing back to the city. Harry Duckett, Mr. Rower, chaired the rowing event at the Regina-hosted Western Canada Summer Games in 1975. To put it bluntly, Dale Eiler of the Leader Post reported, Harry was up the creek without an oar, or a boat, or a boathouse, or rowers. Despite starting from scratch, Duckett and other former RBCers like Al Kerr, Jack Peart, Bob Wallace, and Martin Wilkinson Jr. formed the Regina Rowing Club, buying new boats with games funding and storing them under a bubble tent in the Wascana Centre Authority's compound. In Saskatoon, Bob Haver had helped to form the Saskatoon Rowing Club, and the Saskatchewan Rowing Association came into being. When Bob Ellard, an oarsman and coach from Winnipeg, arrived in Regina to build his career as an architect, all the pieces were in place for a rise to glory. By 1980, the Regina Rowing Club had an annual regatta, the Sprints, had won its first Northwest events in 20 years, had hosted the event for a second time, and had produced the city's first competitive group of female rowers. If rowing's recovery in Regina was quick, the RRC's rise to national and international prominence was meteoric. From 1980 to 1984, the club won no less than 14 Northwest, 15 national, and 9 Henley titles. Ellard was chosen as Rowing Canada's Coach of the Year in 1981, and Rob Curry became the first Regina athlete to row for the national team in 1982, capturing silver in the men's senior B8. The next year, Gus Papini was selected as a spare for the light men's 8, and Rob's club pair partner, Tony Zazada, rowed to bronze in the 8 as part of Canada's Pan Am team. In 1984, Zazada and BC's Harold Backer with coxswain Tan Barkley made the Olympic team. Originally selected as spares, they challenged the existing Olympic coxed pair and earned the right to race in Los Angeles, where they finished 5th in a field of 22. I got my feet wet and learned that traditionally strong rowing countries can be beat, Zazada said of his experience. But he would not get another chance to race again. Tony was killed by a drunk driver just days after returning home from the Olympics. What Tony has given us will be with each of us for as long as we live, Ellard said in his eulogy. Tony is part of our future because he is a benchmark we can all aspire to. Tony was inducted into the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame in 1991. Days after the funeral, Ellard flew to Montreal to coach the RRC's Ellen Gillies and Saskatoon's Audrey Machenko at the World Lightweight Championships. Devastated at the loss of their friend, they nonetheless stayed focused, capturing bronze, the first World Championship medal for Regina. Since these athletes broke through, the RRC has placed a steady number of athletes on the national team. Bree Ellard, Heidi Hackman, Lorne Mack, Rochelle de Jong, Andrea Bunden, Monica Clay, Josh Bansescu, Alex Brazil, and Morgan Kersinger have all worn the maple leaf on their singlets at various international competitions. The RRC has also produced 2 Rowing Canada presidents. In 1986, Bob Ellard held the post, and Brenda Liskey is currently the first female to lead the national organization. In addition, Paul Marcotte, who began his rowing career in Saskatoon, was named Rowing Canada's Official of the Year in 1999. The continued success of senior athletes at the national and international level at events like the Regina-hosted 1987 Western Canada Summer Games, Nationals, and Henley has been due in large part to the rise of both junior and masters rowing. Starting in the mid-'80s, the Canada Games lowered their age limits to promote junior rowing. When Saskatoon was chosen to host the 1989 Canada Games, the province poured millions into amateur sport. The Sask First program left a legacy of new equipment, professional coaching, and medals for talented Regina athletes. Junior programs continued to flourish in the 1990s, with Regina rowers consistently putting in strong performances. As for the Masters, since rowing's revival in Regina over 30 years ago, each time a Regina rower has reached the national team, participated in the Canada Games, or simply taken a learn to row, a Masters rower has often been there to coach. Every time a regatta was hosted or a coaching clinic taught, a Masters rower was there to organize. And whenever a race was run, a Masters rower was there to officiate. Masters athletes, those 27 years of age and older, have come to form the backbone of the Regina rowing community, providing leadership and, perhaps more importantly, continuity as coaches, administrators, and officials. In addition, they have competed and won at the local, national, and international level, adding to Regina rowing's proud and successful history. Since the turn of the millennium, two main events have captured the attention of not just the Regina rowing community, but the city of Regina. In the winter of 2004, Regina rowers helped to deliver the fatal blow to their long-time nemesis, weeds. The Wascana Lake Urban Revitalization Project, or the Big Dig, as it was commonly known, deepened the lake to an average of 5.5 meters from 1.5. If there ever was a single group of people who bawled, hammered the table, cried, snorted their disgust, wrote letters, lobbied governments, grew angry and frustrated, but never gave up hope over the state of Wascana Lake, then it was the Regina Rowing Club, wrote Leader Post executive editor Bob Hughes. The Big Dig also became the big gold mine for the RRC, which raised $40,000 by selling a calendar commemorating the project. The second main event was, of course, the 2005 Canada Summer Games. Bob Ellard, also a member of the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame, served as the Games president and chairman, and Mo Bundon as senior vice president. As they'd done so many times in the past, they began their volunteer recruiting at the boathouse. During the 2 weeks of the Games, every single RRC member was either working with the rowing team or the host committee in some capacity. Rob Curry, Rob Black, and Deb Brown were all vice presidents. Dave Miller and Kelly Silcox ran the rowing event. Paul Marcotte was chief referee, and Mark Hetherington and Andrea Bundon were employed by the event. Pine Island was the hottest venue going, with thousands of raucous fans turning out to watch the rowing regatta. Harry Murray, who coached in the 1920s, would have been proud of his grandson Ian Mitchell's accomplishments in leading Saskatchewan to a third-place finish. Rowing in Regina has seen many changes since that first RBC meeting on June 15, 1907. The boathouse. Transporting of equipment. Ergometer training. Demographics and fees. But one thing has remained the same. Regina rowers have left an indelible mark on the city of Regina. In her graduate studies paper entitled The Duck Ponders, Constructing the Furthest Inland Rowing Club, Andrea Bunden observed that the RBC and the RRC did more than shape the landscape of their sport. They constructed it. On a shallow reservoir in the middle of a prairie plain, they built a boathouse, and when that was done, they built their own homes next to it. They built a membership of aquatic enthusiasts 40 miles away from any natural body of water, and they developed a program capable of producing national and eventually international champions. But their greatest accomplishment must be the creation of a rowing culture and a rowing community in landlocked Regina. This history of culture, this community, is one that the people in this room continue to write, stroke by stroke.